Hello, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? On the phone? A little bit, yeah. Come forward. Okay, a bit closer to the images. So I'm a visual storyteller. I will show you a lot of photos. We will go from the North to the South Pole, over the ocean. What I do, I'm a man with a mission. And my mission, I use photography and image as a tool to build bridges on the front line of climate change. So I really document how climate change looks like, the source of climate change in the polar regions, but also consequences, for example, on Pacific Island states. So you will find me always somewhere on the ocean or on the ice. And the bridges I built is really between the institutes, scientific institutes, policy level, diplomacy level, also governments, and also the industry. So not only source of inspiration, but mainly perhaps part of the solution, and I'm convinced of that, are ethnic minorities and especially indigenous people. Because indigenous people, both in the Arctic, in the Pacific, anywhere in the world, they have this relation towards nature, an understanding, a deep connectivity, and also they understand that they shouldn't take away too much. They only take away exactly what they need, because everything they take away is a part of them as well. They take away, and it's something they should give back in some way. So I documented specifically a lot of Sami and Inuit. This is a group of Sami. And note that I'm also a documentary photographer, so all of the photos you see, they're not manipulated. So this is what you can call a whiteout. This is almost a whiteout in the Arctic. And you see the Arctic, in winter at least, it doesn't show a lot of colors, especially like if you, for example, take this photo. I took it in Svalbard in February. But have a look what happens if we go back 6 months later. This is exactly the same position 6 months later. So June, February. Svalbard is warming up 4 to 6 times faster than anywhere else in the world. What you see is also permafrost thaw. You see that we're only 1,200 kilometers from the geographical North Pole. And for example, on this photo, I shouldn't go too far, but we're all close here. This little red cabin is actually, I should maybe stay here. The red cabin you see is used by scientists for some remote research. On the background, you see one and the same mountain, and you see this S-curve shaped in the mountain. Now that is a visual, it is a witness of what once was and is not there anymore, which are glaciers. And this is a sign of glacial melt. So glaciers are gone, no more ice. On the foreground, you see how permafrost is thawing. The active layer is getting deeper and deeper and bigger, actually, which means that the permanent frozen underground, that layer is getting deeper and deeper. The layer that is permanently frozen, 2 years minimum, following up on each other. You also see some artifacts. You see plastic, you see a tube. All these things pop up when the ice is melting. So one of the big consequences due to permafrost thaw is also the creation of wedges. And of course, the release of also greenhouse gases, not only CO2, but especially methane. And methane in the first 20 years, it has been noted that it's 84 times more active as a greenhouse gas, keeping up the heat in our atmosphere. So it looks like this, and you see actually where the active layer starts to become also, well, the permafrost layer, but you see how everything cracks open. This is really problematic, and it becomes very visible on a lot of places, especially everything north of 78 degrees. So it looks like this. Now, one of the consequences is, of course, also biodiversity. Biodiversity, like plants, for example, seeds, they don't have the time to adapt. So a major part of my work is not only following marine scientists, polar scientists in their work and doing outreach and dissemination of their work, but also the story of biodiversity decline. Like 8 million species, one of them are threatened because of human beings. So I made it a big project of mine, 8 years already. I'm actually documenting what is called the Svalbard Global Seed Vault in Svalbard, obviously. So it all started here. This is what you can see 300 meters deep inside an abandoned coal mine on Spitsbergen on Svalbard. It's called mine number 3. It's now property of the Norwegian government. And you see a door. with an engraved copper plate saying Frøyhav, Frøy, the goddess of agriculture in the old Norwegian mythology. And behind that door, the Nordic countries in 1984 decided to store native crops that are indigenous for within their borders, and to see what happens in terms of longevity, in terms of viability. So they have placed a black container. This is what you can see. I entered this room together with the Food and Agriculture Organization. Once a year, they do this advisory board that checks out the conditions and so on. And 2 years later, in 1986, they started what is called the 100-year experiment. So they have put exactly 20 boxes, and you see them all here. And every 5 years, they're opening one box. So it's called the 100-year trial, and it's made by the Nordic Gene Bank. So every 5 years, they're checking on the viability of these seeds. You see here the dates reversed. So in the upper left box, in 2056, on the 1st of December, they will open this crate. And you will find in every crate exactly the same seed varieties. So they're checking not only the viability of the seed itself, but also the pathogens. It looks like this. This is the one that was opened in 21. I was there as well. So out of this experiment, starting in 84 and then the 100-year experiment in 86, in 2008, the Norwegian government built this construction called the Global Seed Vault, which looked like this in 2013. In 2014, I was able to enter, and I will show you unique images. This is how the entrance looks like, with the door, a ventilation shaft, and a piece of artwork. And so it's constructed 130 meters above sea level, about 130 meters deep inside the permafrost mountain. And you see there is this, after this tunnel, you have a hallway with 3 rooms. The maximum capacity is 4.5 million seed varieties. Now that is all relative. So we are now at 1.2 million seed varieties, and we're almost there, we think, because actually nobody knows how many varieties there are. There are about 1,700 gene banks worldwide, preserving seeds crop diversity, everything related to food crops. And most of it, like we think about 80% is already backed in this vault, because this vault acts as a backup facility of these 1,700 gene banks. So once, sometimes twice, and occasionally 3 times a year, the door opens with the help of an organization called Crop Trust, which is affiliated with the FAO and the United Nations. Seeds are all brought together logistically, worldwide, and are being brought in. They're inventorized and being brought in to be stored. Now have a look at this photo. This is not anymore what you can see inside. This is a tunnel as it looked in 2014. But the irony is that in 2016, there was already a leak, because the permafrost thaw, and here you have a sheen, you said it, a plan, a vertical cut. So the permafrost thaw, and I will show it to you on the map, here, around the tunnel was so rapidly, nobody would have thought that already water infiltrated. Luckily, no seeds were harmed. You see there is a door at the end, so that kept also the water out, but still it's very ironical. So this is the door to the most inaccessible room on Earth, but perhaps also the most important for future generations. And behind that door, it looks like this. And already you see the cooling systems. They're cooling it down until -17 minimum, -18 degrees would be perfect according to international standards for food crop preservation. It's -18 degrees. It's a freezer. And this room is really built to last forever. Let's hope it resists the centuries to come. So behind those fences, you see, for example, the entire collection, seed crop diversity, I should say, instead of collection, of Canada. On the right, you see the collection, the copies of the International Rice Resource Institute, holding more than 100,000 different seed samples of rice. On the left, you see a box of the People's Republic of Korea, which it's really symbolic. It surpasses geopolitical conflict. And on the right, you see a box that is not there anymore, because late 2014, the gene bank in Damascus, holding one of the oldest seed samples of human agricultural history until 12,000 years ago, were actually destroyed, and this was the backup. So this box was already taken out after 2014, and I was lucky that I still took a photo of that box. So let's go back outside. We're going back to Svalbard. This is a photo showing what is going on with sea ice worldwide, both North and South Pole. So this photo symbolizes that you see an animal in its natural environment, and it's only a little piece of chunk of ice where you can still rely on and relax on. You see there is water now, and water is dark. The ice has the function also to reflect the heat and the sun's energy to keep the earth cool, the cooling system of our climate, global climate system. So that is a big problem for our global climate, and the drive is really in the Arctic and also in the Antarctic. So the albedo effect means that it's albedo. I mean, it really absorbs the heat, the water, and globally oceans are warming up. Another problem, and you see how I visualized it, you see the glacier tongue that is retreating as a reflection of the water. A lot of, even marine mammals are depending on the sea ice, like the symbol of the Arctic, the polar bear, is also depending on it. And it's now going more south into villages looking for food, because it relies on the sea ice to hunt also, for example, seals. Now let's go to the other pole. The emperor penguin, the big one. You have to go really deep south to take photos like this. Now, emperor penguins, Adelie penguins, they also rely on sea ice. They rely on it to breed on, to hatch their eggs on. But sea ice is also the source of the ecosystem, because krill, the base of the food pyramid, is growing. Phytoplankton, also, krill, and a lot of biomass is really present under the sea ice. And you see it in the next photo. If you look around, the pointer won't work on the television screen, but you see all these all that is phytoplankton, and also zooplankton, also the krill. So you see sea ice is in decline. That's also what I show actually visually. And Adelie penguin just alone looking for help. So in January this year, I followed a team of marine scientists, and we were catching penguins. We were catching them because we see that penguins are migrating because of decline of sea ice, and we want to understand the patterns of migration. We also want to see, what is really happening to the populations. So this was the road. It was 5 weeks, and we especially researched what is called Marie Byrd Island. And Marie Byrd Island is the only patch of land on our planet that was never claimed by anyone. So even administratively, all of these, we have a treaty, luckily, in Antarctica, protecting also, making sure that we don't use it for military purposes and so on, only for peaceful and scientific purposes. This patch is really like no man's land. So this is also the least discovered patch. And guess what? Unfortunately, we discovered bird flu, especially there in the Amundsen Sea. That was a new discovery. It wasn't there before. So probably brought by birds and also harmful for people. But so that was one of the findings we had in the late February. Another team was focusing on whales and whales beneath the sea ice. So they were using echo instruments. We were also taking ice cores. The right photo is the only one that is not mine. It's property of the Oregon State University. You see, when you do ice coring, you really read the history of our climate. You can see it layer by layer when the snow was falling. Each season, even volcanic eruptions, you see the black layer there, the ring, that is a volcanic eruption. On the left, the Belgians, I'm from Belgium, we have also a participation in the Antarctic history. 125 years ago, a ship named the Belgica was actually conducting the first scientific research expedition 125 years ago. So they were the first to overwinter, which was unexpected. They were frozen into the ice, they were stuck, they couldn't go back. And they conducted a lot of significant research. They found new places geographically. You still have Anvers Island. I'm from Antwerp, Anvers, and Anvers. But also they were taking ice cores, discovering species, and so on. So back to ice cores. You see this map. These are the major places where it happens on the Antarctic continent. And the most significant, and it's not because I'm from the EU, but Dome Sea, Epica, you see it there, this one? It's only 3,200 meters deep. It's less deep than the Russians, but we can look the furthest back in time, up till 800,000 years ago. We can read how climate was actually, how it looked like, the conditions of the atmosphere, the compilation of the atmosphere in terms of carbon, of oxygen, and so on. This is a photo I took in Svalbard to show you how it looks like. So it's always taken in glacial ice, of course, the freshwaters of our planet. It's a reservoir of a planet of freshwater. And you see in the middle, you see some ice core drillings. So it's really a little sample of oxygen, what they're looking for. The oxygen that was formed in between the snowflakes that became ice layer after layer, forming the glacier. That is what they're looking for. This is a picture I took in the storage room, you can say, of the Niels Bohr Institute, and it holds the biggest, all the collection actually of ice cores, both of the Greenlandic ice sheet and the Antarctic ice sheet. So this is pretty unique. It's all stored again at -20 more or less, and they cut it up, they number it, and so you can just look back in time. You can see the compilation of the atmosphere in the year 1500, whatever. It's all there. So it's really a heritage library of our climate system. Let's go back to the Antarctic. So this is the foot of Mount Erebus. And this was deep in the Ross Sea. And actually we had to ask the US Coast Guard to, sorry, let me drink, to clear a path for us, because we had an ice strengthened ship, actually an icebreaker, but you have different classes. And once the ice is really getting thick, well, there are always limits. So that was a nice story to tell. Now, part of what I do is also showing the beauty of our planet, because I want to show here, for example, at the United Nations, what is at stake, what we should fight for. This is a beautiful iceberg with some penguins, Adelie penguins, call it the Penguin Party. Now, of course, image, as a documentary photographer, I'm a witness, and I also want to show how climate change looks like. So this is also an iceberg, but you see a chunk being missing, and you see the next crack is already there. And we're at the southernmost point, so everything floats north towards warmer and saltier water, accelerating the project, the process. Glacial ice, freshwater supply actually, is actually causing rising sea levels. Sea ice doesn't. So this one, for example, is an iceberg that rotated 90 degrees. And before it did, you see how surface water was cutting in the ice. Surface water heating up by day, cooling down by night. It's really a witness. You can actually measure it. It's almost an infographic. So let's go to some sub-Antarctic regions. This is the French overseas region. It's uninhabited. I'm talking about the 3 dots here. It's called the Terre Australe et Antarctique Français. So the Austral and Antarctic French lands, territories. It's always hard to translate French. And these are uninhabited regions, and you have about 80 scientists in total, 30 on one island, on Crozet, and 50 on Kerguelen. So we learned from the past that biodiversity is really an issue. A lot of shipwrecks and, also introduced species and so on brought rabbits and cats, but of course also the 2 major ones, mice and rats on shore. And so many islands have a history of species that got lost because of these 4. So right now, if you conduct science in these regions, and it's really an experimental terrain because it's so harmful, it's so pure still, it's always through a helicopter, by helicopter. The ship goes on anchor, as you can see here. That is a French, Navy, I can say. It's a French research vessel. And so helicopters, as you can see here, are bringing in the instruments, calibration instruments, and so on, to measure what is going on. So this is Crozet, Île de la Possession, in English, Possession Island. It's all volcanic, as you can see. It's a shield volcano. And it also has one of the largest king penguin colonies of the world. And to show you how large, well, this photo is actually taken in South Georgia, different ocean, but it's very similar. This one is not, for example. So it shows you like penguin colonies of 150,000 species. It's really crazy. Especially king penguins, they are really doing well. Emperor penguins, they're on decline because of sea ice. This is one of the islands of the archipelago called Crozet, maybe in English, huh? and it's called East Island. And East Island is left abandoned on purpose. So it's one of the last spots on Earth by law where you cannot go ashore. It's completely restricted, and they do observations from the ships around it, monitoring, and also from the nearest island, which was the one that I showed you with the penguins, Crozet. So it's really one of the last, wild spots on our planet. This is also the latitude where you can find Orca type D, which is very rare to see. It's famous for its little white patch, and it's only, I think it was 2016 when they made it a subcategory. It's really a rare sighted animal. And I took a great photo. I suffered a bit for this photo. I knew they were there, and I was lucky on this shot. This one is eating a bit. So again, I also do scientific outreach and dissemination. So I'm from Belgium. This is the vessel that we have. It's called the Belgica, named after the old Belgica. And so marine scientific work is, of course, very important to understand also not only our ocean, how the ocean functions and so on, but also understand climate change and the process that is going on. So oceanography is really a personal focus as well. So this is what is called the CTD with the Niskin bottles and so on. So they measure vertical in the water column. They measure specific points and take samples of water to measure oxygen, heating of the water and so on. And so CFKs, radioactivity, and of course carbon, because the ocean absorbs 30% of carbon, CO2 worldwide. It's along our planet. So it's all about scientific collaboration. Here we took out some zooplankton in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, and look how it looks like if we zoom in, and we zoom in a bit more. You see all this confetti, all these colors, like this one. This is all mine. This is a random sample, 130 meters deep, about 20 kilometers in front of the coast of Sardinia. These are the Argo floats. This is a program, observation floats program by the United Nations. There are about, I think, already 6,000 to 8,000 right now. So these are floats that are programmed to measure, to go down itself. So we don't need human species anymore for that. And they take the conductivity, temperature, and depth measurements. So this is another scientific mission or expedition in Greenland. You see the polar bear tracks. These are polar bear tracks. So we were actually looking for caves to see how methane is being released as well, not only due to permafrost thaw, but also in caves, in cave systems that are, because of glacial melt, also exposing. The latest of my exhibitions was in Nunavut. Nunavut, I think it's called, right? Nunavut. They always have difficulties with these names. So this is in Arctic Canada. It's really quite north Bay. This was an Explorers Club expedition. So we were actually amongst Inuit to find the famous narwhal. And we found out that narwhal, so they don't have a dorsal fin anymore due to evolution. They were able to hide under sea ice for orca, for example. So no more dorsal fin, but the sea ice is in decline. So also these species, well, they have a problem. They're facing problems, and we want to examine what they do, how they adapt. Will they migrate? What will happen? Will they just decline in population? It's always about adaptation or being extinct. So this was an Explorers Club expedition. So let us go to the Pacific, because glacial melt, well, it has consequences worldwide on coastal erosion, coastal areas, fishing, fisheries, and half of the world's population is living in cities and by the coast. So in cities meaning losing connection with the environment, but also coastal regions, well, they really rely a lot on the ocean for their food pattern as well. So all of the yellow patches, and it's not complete. I also went to federal states of Micronesia and Marshall Islands. I have the mission and ambition to document the whole of the Pacific region, and specifically on the rising sea level. So like I collaborate specifically with Marshall Islands, with Palau and Tuvalu, and I documented for 8 years already. This is the latest of my expedition last year, Marshall Islands. So Marshall Islands together with Tuvalu and also Kiribati. They're the atoll states. There is a fourth one, the Maldives, that is in the Indian Ocean. So now we stay in the Pacific. Atoll states, well, they have an origin, a volcanic origin of an implosion, and the problem is they don't have altitude. So sometimes the highest point is 3 to 4 meters and not even more. So these islands are really doomed to disappear, and so will their cultural heritage. Now, this is very symbolic, of course. I looked up the island that is the most densely populated one. It's called Ebi. This is in the atoll of Kwajalein, part of the Marshall Islands. So it's highly densely populated. Another one is Egypt, and you see how they were starting to build a seawall. That is the mean they try to protect themselves by building walls, but sometimes, well, they just don't have the financial means. Like here, financial means stopped, and they were not able to construct the rest, and especially the southern part here, which is the open ocean, as you can see. So they started the seawall, and then the project was stopped for some reason. Seawalls, of course, well, it keeps the water out, but it's a temporary solution, of course. The thing is also in the Pacific, well, island states, they're so small. The Pacific is a vast ocean, 1/3 of the planet, 2/3 is the ocean, so half of the ocean is the Pacific. And the ocean was always the bridge to the next neighbor. And now it becomes a threat, and we see already in 2-3 generations how it's changing. In terms of coastal erosion, in terms of infiltration of saltwater. So this is a photo, for example, I took of a young girl in Kiribati, and the young girl was having a tire to float, and I asked her, what are you doing? And she said, well, when the high tides come, in order to go to the next atoll to visit an aunt or something, well, you have tides and everything, so she used this because not everyone can afford a kayak or a boat. This photo I also took in Kiribati. So Kiribati is really one of these examples where you really see climate change impact in dramatic conditions. So here they really don't have means to build seawalls, so they used actually rocks and actually coral reefs that died out. You see the bleached corals. In Polynesia, people are also, they don't use furniture, so they're really close to the ocean. This is Tuvalu, the narrowest island of the world, actually. Tuvalu, well, it is the example of coastal erosion. The ocean on every side, on both sides. The narrowest point is about 9 meters. It's really crazy. And it's ocean everywhere. You have the lagoon and the open ocean on the right, but it's all salty water, and it infiltrates, it takes land away. So that is a problem. And what they try to do with the help of the United Nations is building also mangrove plantations, keeping the soil together with their roots. Wading through the water. Of course, when you don't have the ability anymore to crop, when your soil becomes salty, you have to import everything. Tuvalu is now the first country, this is also Tuvalu, where they have to import fresh water supplies. They don't have any source of fresh water anymore. Another problem is waste. They are forced to import everything, which of course leaves a lot of footprint, and they understand what goes in the ocean, well, it goes ashore again. So they now try to manage it by the end of this small atoll, to put everything on a pile. And this is really how small it is. So for these nations, 1.5 degrees is really the difference between the future or, the end of their heritage. So this is another state. This is in Micronesia. It's called Palau. They have a beautiful pavilion here. So Palau, it's not an atoll state, as you can see, and they really understood also how to sustain, how to manage their waters, how to make observations and conduct marine protected areas, for example, and attract ecotourism and abandon sun cream, for example, because it used to be harmful for coral reefs. And so life is flourishing there. They also came up with what is called the Palau Pledge. This is a passport stamp in my passport. And so you have to commit yourself that you don't leave any footprint except the ones that will wash away. It's beautiful. It's like a contract. And it makes you aware before you set foot on land. So other projects I did in the Pacific, this is in Philippines. These are fisher villages, and look how they look like. It's incredible. These people, they have like the highest point of their, land is like 2 meters. And with drone footage, I make it very clear how these people live. So for the last 8 years, I'm documenting the Pacific region. And let's go back to the Arctic, because there is another vault. It's called the Arctic World Archive. It is a vault in the same mine, actually, where the Nordic countries have put their crops in 1984. And so what I try to do is being a voice for these people. All the photos you saw and much more, I'm bringing it in this archive for the future as a symbol of what is happening today, but also to be a voice for these people for the future. So this is how it looks like. This is the entrance of the Arctic World Archive. And what they do is they preserve heritage, human heritage, cultural heritage, data, knowledge, everything that is to the benefit of humanity, actually. So as a Belgian, I brought in the first Belgian contribution of both the Belgian research vessel, the Belgica, and also my footage of Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, and also, what is a fourth one? Palau also. So this is how it looks like. So it's behind that door, again, a container, and it's being printed on a very specific pellicule. It's called pickle. So they print in microfilm that is designed to resist forever. It's really hard to break it down. Even fire takes like 10, 15 minutes to break it down. And this is how they preserve it. So what more can we say and do, right? So I really thank you for being here and listening to this story. It's really about awareness because it's a matter of time. I try to raise awareness through my lectures, through my keynotes as well, books, speaking at universities, also different COPs. Sylvia Earle in the Explorers Club, my big hero. So also publications about marine scientific work and about, well, preservation deep inside mines. This is the Belgian Senate. This is the European Commission. I'm a European, so I try to raise that voice for especially the Pacific, but also indigenous people in the Arctic, Sami, Inuit, inside the heart of the European Union. This is the European Environment Agency, sorry, long day, and some embassies. All right, so thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them. Thank you. No questions? Yes, lady. That's a good question. My background is political science. I'm a political scientist, and then I studied management, global management. Then I started to work in the Flemish Parliament as a communication advisor, you can say. And then I opened an art gallery, and that is really even further from everywhere, you know. But it's also not, because since I was a kid, I was always with a camera in my hand, and I always wanted to have to give purpose in life. So I started to study political science because I wanted to work for the UN, and I was always interested in minorities. And then came climate change in 2013, when I first saw that seed vault. In 2014, I entered that seed vault, and that's really the beginning of the mission. When I had my art gallery, I started to sell my photos, started to give lectures, and this is how I build up everything. So thank you for that question. That was in brief my life story. Yeah. Yeah. And I see now that we still have time, so I was maybe rushing a little bit in my talk, but okay, it was a long day. So any other question? Maybe online, I don't know. Nope. Sure. It's hard. The first thing is, if you want to go on a marine vessel, on a scientific vessel, you take a spot of a scientist. So you have to convince the institution or the one who pays, whether it's a government or private, you have to convince them of the importance of communication. And especially what I do, I'm not an exact scientist, but that I think is an asset, because there is a gap. Scientists, some can communicate great. That's not my point, but they have different minds. They come with data sheets, not with policy reports. So I see this gap, and I see it here at COP. You know, I see it everywhere in the world. There is a gap between politicians, the industry, and scientists. They think differently. So this is universal. It speaks. It evokes emotion. Photography. It tells a story, especially when I'm there as well. But it tells a story by itself. That's at least my goal. So, and I show, you saw the different photos. So Some of them, they show you the instruments and the methods, and others, they really show you what is going on. So, thank you. All right. Well, we should exchange cards and talk. Maybe I can do some outreach for you. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's talk some more. Sir, you have a question. I was more mistakes. Okay, I think it's hard. And I normally leave it to the institution, the person. Yes. So that is also a good question. And sometimes if it's in the high seas, the permission. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. And really, the breakout of what I do, I normally do say yes. I mean, we have a lot of characteristics also, so I feel in the worst conditions now, especially during of this terrible. I think last meter, wind was coming up, it was rain, not snowing, that is also good. So snow and rains. And I was so far with the drone, there was no, right? Oh, I don't know. Where am I? So, and then you have 9 meter, your boat is drifting, right? The wind is coming up, you have the rain, and then you have to land the drone. And then there's a lot of photos from the water. It didn't. But it was, yeah. Any questions? No questions. Okay. Let's talk. Thank you.